We are glad to have you joining us once again on Grace to Stand. My name is Darin Stone, and I'm here with Pastor George Sayor, and it's a privilege to be back because we took a short hiatus last week. Normally we post our videos and our podcasts on Tuesday or Wednesday of the week, and this week we're back on schedule, but our posting of the podcast has moved down a couple of days, largely due to an event that happened in George's life and in his family's life earlier in the week, which just threw his whole week and our whole podcast off course. George was in Virginia with his church on a trip, and on his way back on Sunday evening was involved in a rather serious accident, and we just wanted to talk a little bit about that, and I wanted to ask George about that whole experience and how the Lord has worked and what he is learning and has learned through it from the Lord, and just something about the goodness of the Lord in the midst of something that was rather catastrophic and scary and serious. So, George, why don't you just share a little bit about what happened there and maybe how the Lord, through His Word, has worked in and through that experience?
Yes, thanks, Darin. Yeah, and I even was skeptical on doing this episode. Like I typically, I struggle with the, do I keep talking about things or do I not? And usually I don't fixate on things. And, but yes, we had an accident, and it could have been, I mean, it was catastrophic to possessions, but it could have been deadly to me and my kids. And, it's not the first time I've had a life or death experience. I told Susan I've used up my 9 lives, and she wasn't really amused by that. But my point is, I've almost died a number of times. Two motorcycle accidents, a few times in the kayak, a couple times almost drowning in the ocean, and now this. But why I need to keep talking about it is because, one, people have shown love to us in amazing ways. And two, first is God's grace and goodness. And I feel like when God shows up in extraordinary ways, I want to shout it from the rooftops. And so God is always with us. We could have all died, and He would be the same gracious, loving Father that He is. But His hand upon us through this was so evident. And so let me read 2 verses from Matthew 10, and then I'll throw up a picture and explain a little what happened. But this verse just came to mind. Are not 2 sparrows sold for a penny, and not one of them will fall to the ground apart from your Father? But even the hairs of your head are all numbered. Fear not, therefore, you are of more value than many sparrows. And I just got a chill even just reading that, because the idea that myself and my 3 kids walked out of this accident without, I always say without a scratch on me. I have a couple scratches on my hands, but without a scratch on us, is no whiplash. No, I really think the Lord's hand was on us. I'm going to throw up a picture, and then I'll explain what happened.
I have to say, I was just piddling around on Sunday evening on Facebook, and I see this right here, this picture that George is showing of his vehicle and trailer and all sorts of mess from the trailer scattered along the side of a highway. And I'll tell you this, from the perspective of a friend of yours, George, that's a scary sight to see someone that you love as a friend and seeing what happened to your vehicle and how dangerous that looks. I mean, it looks like you didn't roll over or anything of that nature, but obviously the airbags are deployed. There's significant damage to your vehicle and the trailer, and you're jackknifed, and it looks like you're turned in the opposite direction of traffic. I mean, lots of that just looks remarkably scary, and that it could have been even much worse than it was.
Yes, so that's right. The car is facing against traffic, and so I was in the left lane. We were camping. We were camping at Hungry Mother campground in State Park, I guess, in Virginia, with probably almost 60 people from the church, a large contingent from Meadowview, and most people were leaving Monday, but we typically try to leave Sunday and get back. We have church for the 60 of us out there in the woods, and then we pack up and leave, and that way we kind of have a day at home. So Susan had already left. We had the dog. We take 2 cars, and she took the dog home, and a lot of stuff, so it's the bedding typically. But I said I'll stay for the kids as long as they want to stay. It was raining all day, so the kids, I thought we would stay into the night because the nighttime activities are always fun, campfires and stuff. But it was raining all day, from drizzling to pouring, and it was 52 degrees, so cold. I mean, it was just wet the whole day. So we left, packed up, put on like dry clothes because we were totally soaked, and the dry clothes we had were like very light clothes, but it didn't matter. We were in the car. We were going to go to dinner. We were on the road at 4:30. The weight was most of it was in the front. It was distributed fine, and it was pulling straight. But I must have hit a patch of water, and I felt it floating behind me. And suddenly, the car, I was in the left lane. It drove, like the car started skidding to the right. So now the trailer's pushing me from behind, and the car is veering right. And we basically T-boned the guardrail on the right. So I had to cross from my lane to the right lane to the guardrail. Praise God. First miracle, nobody was next to us. And second miracle, that nobody was behind us in either lane, because we would have gotten totally destroyed by a semi. As a matter of fact, you can see in this picture, let's see. You could see there's huge semis going 70 miles an hour.
Oh, right.
And you could see over here, just the water coming up that the semi's throwing off, and so you also see it is sort of on an incline. So I wasn't speeding. I mean, it's the smaller engine in the Tahoe. It's a heavy load that we had. It just was what it was. But Darin, it felt like we were in bumper cars, because I'm trying to find.
Yeah, it is amazing that in an experience like that can only last a few seconds, it just feels like it goes on and on and on and on, doesn't it? I mean, it just.
Well, this is the weird thing. All of us have we didn't black out, but our memory is a fog.
Sure.
And we thought we hit the guardrail and that was it. Well, when we came out of the vehicle, we saw. Do you see where that white car is?
Yes.
Back there? And do you see where these guys are?
Mm-hmm.
We hit back there, and the car and trailer spun and continued traveling up the road. I mean, that's 20 yards. I don't know how far it is to that car. And at this point, the gear is mostly cleaned up. I mean, there were bikes up in the hills, and but people had come out and helped clean up. But basically what happened is, again, the car from the left lane swerved to the right, hit the guardrail. The trailer spun around the driver's side and spun the car around and ended up between us and the guardrail. The trailer hit multiple spots, and then we were just sliding up the road, I guess, and all our stuff was all over the place. You see the driver's side door is facing the sky, basically, and I didn't realize how precarious of a position the car was in. But I was like, am I able to climb out of this, or is this car going to fall over? And the car didn't. So I didn't want the kids coming out the bottom without me trying to get out first. And so I came out the top and then ran around the car and opened the door. So
you came out the driver's side door.
That's right. I came out up here, and I kind of jumped down.
Just jumped down.
Yeah.
And were all your kids in the back, or was someone sitting in the front as well? And
yeah, my oldest son was in the front with me, and two other ones were in the back. And I remember it was harrowing, and all I could think of, I just kept telling them, hold on. And then when we hit the guardrail, and they started asking, and I'm asking if they're okay. I'm like, stay in your seat, because I totally anticipated a truck was coming behind us to take us out, And then I didn't realize we were still sliding up the road, and then yeah, it's crazy. And so we get out.
So you get out the driver's door, and you went around to the side and let out your oldest son.
Yeah.
On his passenger front door, and then
opened the door. It hit the ground. The door was facing the ground. It was like, I don't know, 20 inches for him to squeeze out of it, I guess.
And were you you were concerned that the car might tip over, or did you realize it after the fact, that after you and the kids all got out of the car, just how precarious of a position the car was in? Was it you weren't really thinking about that at the time when you were getting your kids out?
You're right. I knew we had to be careful getting out, but I didn't, like, when I look at these pictures now, I'm like, how is the car being held up in the air? And God forbid it came down on us as we were getting out,
Right. It looks like just enough weight of it was leaning up against the trailer, which is leaning up against the guardrail.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yes. And so now we get out, and you can't really see it from there, but it's raining. Mm-hmm. You actually can see it from, like, around the hood of the car. You might see some smearing of water, but it's raining and it's cold, and so we get instantly soaked. And two guys stopped. They were really nice, because I knew we were going to be out there for hours. And so the one guy had his own trailer, and he asked, he goes, "What were you, hydroplaning?" I said, "Yeah, I think so." He goes, "Yeah, I was just hydroplaning." And by the way, on the drive back, because I called Susan, and I'll jump ahead and then jump back, but when we were going back home again, 4 hours later, I filmed this stretch of the road, and there were 3 live accidents without trailers, just cars that spun out on this section of road in the same 5-mile area of our accident. We saw where the guardrail was, where we hit it. But I asked the kids are okay and all that before I got out, and they were. And I said, "Okay, be careful, stay where you are. I'm going to get us out." And I called Susan, and I'm like, "Everybody's okay, but you got to come back and get us, because I've totaled the car. Everybody's okay, And so she had just gotten home. It's 2.5 hours. She might have been home a half hour, an hour, and she gets back in, drives 2.5 hours back. And then I'm like, what are we going to do? Like, our stuff was everywhere. I wish people cleaned it up very quickly, but it was 3 bikes, very large tents, a number of tarps, table. You see the table on the floor here. Right. Probably 7 camp chairs. Just stuff everywhere. Bike helmets, fishing gear, all that. And it dawned on me, well, we're only 20 minutes from the campground, So I called a friend, him, Kevin Miller, one of our ruling elders who was there. I didn't get him. And then I didn't try calling other people, because it was a weird thing, Darin. I was focused, but I couldn't focus. Like, I was focused on what I was focusing on, but I wasn't able to focus on. It was weird. It was a tunnel vision type of a scenario. And now people are coming up to me and asking me questions. And at some point, I went back to my phone, and I realized he's calling me. And so I was like, oh, good. He must have realized he missed the call. And so I asked him if he could say, hey, we wrecked. We're okay. But could you come back with the pickup truck? And so him and a friend, John York and Kevin Miller, came. And then I didn't even think of it, but Kevin's wife, Amy, called my wife, Susan. This is just how the church mobilizes, So Kevin's like, at the campground, well, I got to get George. They just wrecked the car. And so Amy's first thought is, let me call Susan. So she calls Susan, who's back in North Carolina, and she just says, hey, is there anything I can do? And my wife was smart to say, yeah, can you go get the kids and to bring them to the campground? Which I didn't even process that, right? Oh, so my kids were waiting in this guy's trailer who had pulled over to stop because to get him out of the rain. And I was so conflicted about that. And even now I don't know that it was the right thing, but I felt like we were freezing and we had no warm stuff. And so I remember asking my oldest son, he's almost 16, so he's not like a little kid, but like, do you want to wait in the trailer or do you want to stay out here? He goes, we'll go in the trailer. I said, okay. So that was like God sent us angels, but I totally was like, is this guy going to drive off with my kids? Trooper came, paramedics came, wrecker came, other people stopped. Before I knew it, like
how long were you in a position like this before any emergency services came?
Man, they came quick. The two guys that stopped to help me, one guy was on the phone and he had called it in, and it's one of those situations I didn't get to thank these guys because I was in the ambulance and they had left. I'm like, darn, I really wanted to thank them.
Right.
I also wanted to get their statement about the hydroplaning for the cops.
Sure, right.
Because like
you were in a rural area. I mean, it's not like there were likely to be emergency services just at every exit. I mean, you're kind of out there in the middle of the boonies, so.
Yeah, I totally thought this was going to be like, I think from the time of the accident to the time we got off the road was an hour. I mean, that's not very long. You would think it would be much longer. It might not have even been that. And there was like a bunch of guardian angels. Like people stopped and were just getting our stuff and putting it in the trailer, and then they were gone. And so. Yeah, and then at the end, so then Kevin and John show up, and at that point the wrecker's putting he's getting ready to tow the stuff, and I'm like, I got to get my stuff out of the trunk. That's where our clothes was and computer. At least the stuff in the car stayed in the car, And he's like, you can get it back at the lot. And I'm like, no, I'm not going back to your lot. I live 2 hours from here. Like I wasn't able to think straight. They said my blood pressure was elevated. Of course, that's normal. I mean, I went to the ambulance. But that's just where friends helped because they worked it out with the guy. Like they were like, well, where are you taking the truck? Oh, it's 5 miles up the road. Okay, we'll meet you there. What's the address? I couldn't get all that, And so the kids went back to the campground. We went to the
now, how are your
lot.
kids? Okay, so your kids go back to the campground. They've just been in an accident where they're having to get out of a vehicle that is lodged at a 45-degree angle on the side of the highway in the middle of the pouring down rain and the coldest Memorial Day that we've ever had. So, right. I mean, how are they doing with all that? So they end up going back and you stay behind. But how are they just processing this? I mean, your children are not little kids, but they're still children, and even not being children, even if they weren't children, it's a traumatic event. So I'm just how do they deal with that?
Yeah. Thanks for asking. They were totally, they were in shock.
Yes.
Quiet. Weren't responding. I had to ask them questions multiple times to get good answers out of them. Like, are you okay? Yeah. Right. And the people back at the campground said when they got back to the campground, they were weren't very responsive. This picture shows, like, I didn't think anything happened to the inside of the car. So there's the dome light popped out of the ceiling. Mm-hmm. You see,
you have to hit pretty hard for that to happen. Yeah.
I mean that's one of those things that holds your clothes up. Right. Like again, this is the interior.
Dry cleaners. Yeah.
Right, and then look at this scratch or wedge along the ceiling. Like I have no idea.
Bent.
What's that?
It looks like the ceiling.
Yeah.
Bent and formed a crease.
Right. It looks like the ceiling creased, and maybe that's what popped things out. And so, yeah.
Well, of course, the airbag came out of the side as well. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this is the back of the trailer. You see the guardrail. Right. Now remember, the car has already hit the guardrail, and this is the third place of impact because it had to. This is that side of the trailer. This side of the trailer had to hit the guardrail first, and then the trailer continued to spin around and hit and smack that side. Mm-hmm. So, Yeah, it was violent, and yet this is again where God comes in. Like we didn't experience the violence. We knew it was bad. I mean, believe me, when I started swerving across the road to make impact, like I thought this is it, you know. And all I could think of was my kids, and then it's just kind of like we're fine. And you notice the front airbags didn't deploy. And this is a 2008 vehicle. I don't know if there's a problem with the airbags, or maybe it's better they didn't deploy because maybe we'd have injuries from airbags. But we hit forward, and yet nobody has whiplash. Nobody has a bump on their head.
Yeah,
it's
nobody's. How is anyone? Are your kids sore, or are you? I mean, just sometimes your body after a few days you feel soreness after.
I know. Right. And no, the next day, I mean, now we're 4 days later. This happened Monday. It's Thursday. No soreness, no anything. When it first happened, myself and Ariel on our left shoulder felt like our shoulders had a bruise. So I think the car, like it sent us into the door. But my sons didn't have that. But we're totally fine. Like there was
everybody was wearing seatbelts too, and I think that's a very important point here. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's been a law for a long time, but I just do it. I just put my seatbelt on intuitively. I don't even think about it. But some people don't wear seatbelts. I mean, when they're driving around, and you think of something like this. You all come out of an accident completely unscathed. I mean, more or less unscathed, but it could have been far worse. You could have had some significant injuries had you not been wearing a seatbelt.
Oh man, I don't. Yes, thank God we were all in a seatbelt. We always do,
right.
But you never know. Again, like I thought too when my car was in the left lane and it swerved right. At that point, I think we could have easily rolled. Because the trailer's pushing from behind and we've banked right. I guess I would have had to flip the trailer like that, but it didn't. Like we didn't roll. No truck came in from behind us to hit us. Nobody's got whiplash. It really feels like the Lord's hands were around our bodies as this all happened. I know that sounds hyperbolic or emotional, but I don't have an explanation for the amount of damage to the car and the trailer and the amount of banging and hitting and everything else. I mean, look at that's steel twisted, that we're all fine.
Well, in God's sovereign plan and goodness to you, he preserved you not only your life, but from significant injuries.
Yes.
That's a thing.
I went from being amazed that we were alive to intensely grateful that there were no my kids could have been maimed. I'm not even thinking about myself. It was. And honestly, Darin, this is part of the whole thing. It's like waves of gratitude, especially those first 2 days. I mean, I am immensely gratitude now, but emotional feelings the first 2 days again, because all my kids could be dead,
Right.
Susan, and then my heart was breaking for Susan. I mean, we all could have been dead, the four of us. And then that makes, so between gratitude, but then also, and nobody has understood this since I've said it, but maybe it'll click with somebody. Believe it or not, I felt shame. I just felt like I don't believe I could have done anything differently. I don't believe I was speeding because the car was not going fast. But you just, when you're the one at the wheel, and as part of it is my own control, I think I'm in control of things. And so I was behind the wheel, I'm driving, and I could have killed us all and my kids. And then just the gratitude, like the Lord saying, there's no shame, there's no condemnation, there's no nothing, but you just, and the way I've had that experience with some people when they have somebody dies in their family that they have regrets or they wish they had said this or they wish, and it's like you can't think like that, and
right. But it does seem to be a common human experience when you are involved in something like this, even when it's not at all your fault. I mean, you could have just hit a slick spot that you didn't see, and you can blame yourself if you're going 95 miles per hour down an interstate with a trailer on a rainy day, but that's not what was happening. And
Right.
so it does seem to be a common human experience that there's shame involved, and that is, just even there, we always have to be going back to who we are in Christ and the gospel, and
Oh, that's good.
His mercy to us, and I don't want to over spiritualize that and just to throw like a Bible Band-Aid on it, so to speak. But it really does seem to be the case where the enemy is always seeking to use even things like this to destroy you, to tear you down, to make you feel like a failure. Because your car's jacked up and your kids were in there, and it's just you're slowing down I mean, all of that. And,
Right.
All of that. We've all been on the other side of this. Some kind of accident on the side of the road like this, and it's been somebody else that they walk away unscathed. They hit a oil slick in the road. And, our trip was delayed by 15, 20 minutes because of someone's accident, right? And so, yeah, I mean, I can see why you would feel the shame there, even if really there's not much you could have done differently. And it's just a reminder that we always have to continue to go back to God's grace, and there's no condemnation, and not to grant us excuses for our sin, but the enemy will sometimes seeks to accuse us over things that are not sin in our lives, and to affirm us in the things that actually are. Isn't that just such a devious way in which you work? But
yes,
anyway,
that's so good.
Thoughts on all of that? I get what you're saying. It seems very irrational, when you step back to even think that you would feel shame over it. But I don't know. I think that a lot of people do when issues like this, circumstances like this, happen in their lives.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that, Darin. That's that's right. And then, so we left. I leave the car and the trailer up there. We got all the stuff out of it in the pickup trucks, and and everybody at the campground took some stuff for us, and I just assumed it's all covered under insurance. I have full coverage on the Tahoe, but the trailer's not covered. Now, I don't care about losing the trailer. Well, first of all, let me say this: as I looked out, and my kids' bikes were destroyed, and they're brand new because two of the kids had just graduated elementary school and middle school, and we bought them bikes, and then Adams was new from 2 years ago and hardly used. Mountain bikes, nice aluminum frame, disc brakes, stuff like that, and they're destroyed. Trailer's destroyed. I love my car. I know it's old; it's 15 years old, but I think you can see the paint on it. I mean, I just had a lot of pride in my 15-year-old Tahoe. I thought I'd keep it for over 20 years, But never did I have a feeling of like, oh, look at all this stuff I lost. Like, as I'm standing in the midst of, it looked like a hurricane had not destroyed a giant shed or something, in
right.
Just a yard sale, stuff everywhere, and but after then you got to deal with it all. And again, I don't really care. I mean, I would have rather not lose the trailer, but that wasn't a concern. The concern is my trailer's accruing storage fees up in Virginia that I'm responsible for because it's not covered on insurance, and the tow fee, So here I'm like, and then I'm thinking it's a 15-year-old Tahoe. It does have full coverage, but like they're only going to give me a couple $1,000s, like, and then I got to buy a new car, and that wasn't really kind of in the plan. The car's worth a lot more, I thought, than what they'd give me, and. And so I'm working through all that, and I'm arguing with the agents, politely, but I am pushing back and saying, well, if my car hit somebody else's trailer, would you cover their trailer? And they said, well, yeah. And I said, okay, my car hit my trailer, so why isn't my trailer covered? Well, it's yours. You got to have its own coverage, So
Yeah.
I'm like, so I'm like, well, this is going to cost me hundreds and hundreds of dollars because how am I going to get this thing's untrailerable? The wheel was bent, and who knew if the axle was bent? So I just asked one of the guys up there at the campground because they were still up there. I said, hey, can you check the trailer and see if it's roadworthy? I may have to go pick it up because I'm responsible for this thing. And he said, it's not roadworthy, but you could just get it with another trailer. And I said, well, how am I going to do that? I just assumed let the dump take it, but how are we going to? He goes, no, I have a flatbed trailer. We'll go up tomorrow and we'll get it. And this guy takes his whole day. So he drives back on a Monday, picks up his trailer and me, and drives back up there on Tuesday to pick the trailer up. And then, yeah, I know. It's just, and God's like working all the details out,
Yes.
And then I get up there and the lady's like, we're not going to charge you for the tow because, first of all, it's part of the car, but we know insurance isn't covering it. And I said, oh, thank you. What do I owe you for storage? She goes, no, we're not charging you anything. You're in a, we feel bad for you and it's okay. And I was just like, praise God, thank you. It's like hundreds of dollars saved, in this whole thing.
Yes.
And then we get the trailer back. So now the trailer's dealt with, and then State Farm, and my agent, they're cutting me a check already. And they're giving me very fair value for it. So
I can't.
Yeah, I know, right? I can't complain. I can replace it for what they're giving me, and I'm very happy about it. And I'm just like, wow, Lord, I really didn't have to do anything. I mean, I just had to walk through the doors you were opening, and that was just a really good lesson for me because I'm usually willing to kick down doors if I have to, but He's just working it out.
That's just fantastic, and I mean how the Lord has provided for you and gotten you through all of those details. That's not the first thing that comes to your mind when you go through an accident like that. But then you've got to deal with insurance and the storage of your vehicle and getting everything out of it that you actually really need to have, like the essential components of it. But then to have people sacrifice their own time. It's no small thing to make that voyage up there to deal with all of that, and that's just a tremendous blessing to have people who step in the gaps like that. So, are there other ways in which you've seen the church really care for you guys in the midst of this? You're the pastor. You're the one that's supposed to be caring for people. You're not just the preacher. You're the pastor. You're there for people when they go through things like this. So it's sometimes very humbling and very difficult for pastors to receive from members of their own congregation care that they're used to providing for others. So how have you seen that, and what has that sort of done inside of you and maybe even Susan, your children? Just tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's a great point, and that's part of this. It's like, God gives us the church, and the church is part of His grace to us, and I don't know how many hundreds of just wishes and prayers, people praying for us, and I told the people that helped us that night, I could see myself in their shoes. If I was in that situation, of course, it's a 20-minute drive. I'm going to come get you, but it was more than that. It was like I just felt alone. I was alone on a road with 3 kids, and I had people, I had congregants that had my back,
right,
and friends, that's congregants of friends, that had my back, and they took my kids and they made my kids feel warm, and they gave them food when they got to the campground. There was like all these people back at the campground, and they stuck them in an RV that was heated and with other kids, and suddenly my kids got more comfortable, and then when I don't take help easy, so I don't ever want to be a burden on people, but these guys were just like helping me get all my junk, and part of me just wanted to just leave it all, but I probably lost $1,500 besides the trailer, the $1,500 worth of camping stuff and bikes. Just that we've accumulated over years, and but some things were salvageable, whatever. And they were out in the rain helping me get it and put it in their truck, and then they had to get it home, and then they're delivering it to my house. Like I'm like, hey, I'll come pick up my stuff. No, we'll make we're going to come to you. Mm-hmm. We've had congregants offer us things, and I mean neighbors even in the neighborhood came because they saw the picture, and it's just neat to know you're not alone, and so, and part of that was part of the reason why I was glad we were going to do this, was because I want to say thank you to everybody, just to show us that you love us,
Yes.
As far as my wife, I don't know. I mean, she was emotional when she got us, and I think it hit her when she saw some images that she could have just lost her whole family. She didn't even know what was happening. And the kids, I don't know. I tried to process it with them last night, but they're teenagers, and yeah, man, God is so good. It was an event that, again, he would be equally as good if he took us all home. Mm-hmm. And I know he'd walk with my parents and my wife and the church through that. But there's no reason why we should have no injuries, let alone be dead. I mean, I'm sure naturalistically people would explain this stuff away. I'm just telling you, the amount of traffic that was backed up. I wonder if that's in one of those pictures. The amount of traffic that was backed up when they were, let's see. You can't really tell. Oh, I don't have it on the screen anyway. But like there are cars everywhere. How there were no cars when this all went down? How we didn't roll or flip? That guardrail was only there for a couple hundred yards. Like we had just entered the section where the guardrail was, and then it ended shortly after. So, why the car didn't fall on us? Why, all the whys. Why something didn't come back and hit us? And then just to work out all the details. So, yeah, God is good, man.
It seems like we are in so much control over our lives. I mean, 15 seconds before that crash happens, perhaps you're just talking about your camping trip over the weekend, or what's coming up, or whatever's going on, or just taking in the drive, and next thing you know, you're tilted on the side of the road, and you've hit a guardrail, and your stuff is everywhere, and airbags are deployed, and you've been in this terrible wreck, and you just realize that you just are not in control. I mean, you could be just driving down the road, and someone could spin out of control and smash into you, and that could be it. And you're not even. You could be stopped at a red light. You're not even going anywhere. I mean, that happens. That happens. And I think of what is it, Psalm 73, where the psalmist says, whom have I in heaven but you? And there's nothing on earth that I desire besides you, even though my flesh and my heart may fail, even though I might be seriously injured, even though I might die, even though something terrible may happen to one of my children or my family. The Lord is the strength of my heart and my portion forever. And that is not just sort of Christianese, make me feel better when some hypothetical tragedy may take place. That's what we need to lean into in our whole lives and in ordinary circumstances. But when you go through something like this, you tangibly see that the Lord has to be and really is the strength of our heart and our portion forever. And it sounds to me, what I'm hearing from you is that that's something that you are enjoying in the midst of this. It's something that God, you've learned this throughout the course of your life in other ways, but it's just, you keep learning it, right? You just learn it throughout the course of your life. And he just gives you a special dosage of that through a circumstance like this. And I'm just so grateful that he has preserved you and protected your children. And these are not wasted circumstances. These don't happen because God's just sort of checked out. His attention was elsewhere when you were driving down the road. I mean, this is in the providence of God, and it's not wasted. And I praise Him for that.
Wow, thank you. Wow, that's great insight, because I am kind of enjoying experiencing God afresh. Especially like I said, I try to get things done. So I filed the insurance claim at 1 a.m. that night. We got home to another 2-hour drive, settled in, took all the wet stuff out of the minivan and threw it out in the garage. And then I went and filed an insurance claim. And that's when I found out the trailer wasn't going to be covered. And now that's on my mind, And I woke up the next day, and I was reading in a scripture reading plan, and I got to a Psalm of David, and it was just something like about the Lord having to fight. Like, David can't do it on his own. Like, the Lord's going to fight for him,
Mm-hmm.
And I just took that again. I'm not that I had a word from the Lord, or but just like, I got to wait on the Lord. These things there's a lot that's out of my control, and that's okay. And I just kind of turned it over to Him, and that's not easy for me at all. And I mean, here we are Thursday, and they're already cutting me. I mean, there's an electronic payment going to be made today or tomorrow. It's already all worked out, It's like, what? And we got the trailer, and it's done, and So, it is. What I hope for us is like that we don't forget. Like, there's all these details, and then we wonder when other life happens a year from now, like, is God watching? Is He paying attention? Is he in this, or is He going to let me go through this alone or something? And it's silly. I mean, He's got, like you said, like you said, like we were talking about the camping trip and how we're so glad to be in a warm car and not wet, and we're looking forward to a nice dinner. And I even told him, like, you guys want to go to a nice dinner? We don't want to go to a fast food place. Yeah, that's good. Okay, yeah. And seconds later, this. But yet to God, there was no. He wasn't taken by surprise by this. It's not like he was having a cup of coffee and he would look down and he says, "Oh boy, I better protect them," And so, again, I just want to stress to people, like, we could all be dead and God would still be good.
Yes,
it's not that. It's not that, because sometimes it's like, oh God, I'm not. There's nothing special about George except that I'm a child of the King, and he didn't save my family. He saved my family despite me, not because of me. And He could have taken us all, and he would still be good and loving, and He would work through that, and all things would still work together for good for those who love God and are called according to His purpose. And that's the hard thing. I know there are people who have faced tragedy and it hasn't worked out this way. And that's why I do think the church is there. The church was there for me in this. I think in some of it, the all things work together. I think this accident, in how it's working in me, is reminding me exactly what you said. Like, George, you're not in control. You think you can control everything, and here you're not. And as a matter of fact, this accident came out of nowhere. I was going straight on a road. I wasn't making a turn. Nobody was turning into me. Yes, the road was wet, but we were going straight on a road, and it happened. So, yeah, man, that's good, Darin.
Well, I'm so grateful for you. I'm grateful for your wife and children, and for Meadowview, for the people that stopped along the side of the road to help, for the first responders who were there to care for you, and the people who cut you slack on having to pay for storage and all that. But all of that is just a little sliver of God's kindness, and that's who I'm most thankful for, the Lord, for His goodness in this. And everybody in life is going to go through things like this, similar to this, just these unexpected, really scary moments in life, and you probably go through more than one of them for sure. But there are opportunities, and there are opportunities to take all of that theology that we hear and we're taught, and that sometimes gets stuck just right up here between the two ears, and apply it to our hearts and lives. And then also to see the church really step into action when someone is in a real time of need. Because I know Meadowview, they're not doing this. This isn't something that they would just do just because you're the pastor, right? Like, they're not doing this. It's hard to receive it as the pastor, but they're not doing it just because you're the pastor. They would do this for one another in the church, and I think that just speaks so much to our need to be connected. Like, we're part of the body of Christ, and that's an important metaphor. So you, as part of the body of Christ, are in a state of injury and need, and the rest of the body comes to serve, and that's a blessing to see that, and hopefully inspires more of us as members of churches to step in as well to our brothers and sisters who are struggling in some capacity like this. So, George, thank you for taking the time to share just a little bit about this experience, and we'll continue to pray that the Lord brings redemption out of it, and continues to show you His kindness, and also to your wife and children as well.
Man, thanks, and thanks for listening. Sometimes I feel like I'm going on, but again, I wanted to do it. So yes, thank you very much, and we're going to sign off. General Assembly's in 2 weeks, Darin. I'm not sure what episode we'll do next week, but we probably will take General Assembly week off, unless I don't think we're going to be able to record there. So
I don't think so, but it might be good to talk a little bit about that as it comes up.
Yes, yeah. Maybe we'll talk. Maybe next week we'll talk about the PCA and the 50th anniversary.
Right. Let's do that.
Good. Okay. Thanks for listening, everyone. This is George and Darin. We are signing off, and we will hopefully, or you'll see us in a week.